Hello guys and welcome back to the channel. Tonight we're going to do a quick video on some 1960 Topps baseball cards I picked up as part of a lot. As you guys know, I like to go out and look for I like to go to places like flea markets and yard sales and that sort of thing to look for cards and look for some good deals if I can find them. But in the wintertime, that's a little more difficult. So what I do more in the wintertime is basically buy cards on eBay. And the goal has to be getting the cards at a good price. So let's start off by showing some of the cards. Now, these cards I actually picked up from Greg Morris in an auction, and some of them look like they're trimmed to me. But I've compared them to, and that's not to badmouth Greg Morris in any way, you know what I mean? Because they're very good with their grades typically, very very good. Usually, what they say is what you get, and it's very much a there's not typically any problems with their cards. But as I've measured them up, they seem to be sort of okay. So this is a lot of 1960 Topps baseball. There was 140 cards, and as per usual, this is how I like to buy the lots. There were 140 cards in the lot, all in between shipping, tax, and the cost of what the auction ended at. I paid 81.5 cents a card, so 82 cents a card. And I was hoping that by buying it, I would be able to get a lot of fillers and sort of find some cards. So I'm going to try to do this like this. Find some cards and maybe sneak a star or two. Well, the bad news is there weren't any stars. The listing didn't list that there would be any stars, really. And the early cards are the lesser conditioned cards. Now, the listing was for good to VG excellent. And I would say that that's accurate. These cards are crisp. There are some good, which, have the, some dinged corners and such, and some creases and whatnot. But for the most part, these cards are very sharp. And there's some cards that are better than average. So, but typically when I buy a lot like this, I'm really hoping that I can snag a star or two in the mix. And, there may be a few in here that, would make my toes curl, but not today. These, there might be there might be a Hall of Famer or two that that's not maybe registering with me. This one's creased, as you can see there. I got some damage on the surface and whatnot. There may be some, low-level Hall of Famers that are in here, or even some low-level stars. This card, as you can see, has some writing on it. But they seem to be at the right size, and they just looked short, I guess, initially when I saw them. But as I compared them to the other 1960 I had, they were pretty good. There might be a card or two that is, in fact, trimmed here and there, but for the most part, these are very good. And then I went back and I checked the listing, and I wanted to see if there was any mention of it. And typically, Greg Morris cards would tell you, at least through their description, they tell you if a card's suspected of being trimmed or whatever the case may be. So for the most part, these do measure up in size. And I've sort of been falling a little bit behind. As you can see, the early cards are creased. So some of these, like the first 100 cards, the first 100 cards or so have some corner issues, but have some dings to them as well, have some creases in them. However, as you go along and you get into the later cards, they get much better. You know, you got Bill Fisher. You know, a lot of nicely conditioned cards as you go along in the lot. And I'm going to try to point out a couple here and there to see if there's any that really kind of... Bobby Avila, I've heard of him. You know, so there's some the other good thing, that one's going to crease, but there were a number of Red Sox cards in here. For those of you who've seen my videos on the Red Sox, there another crease there. For those of you who've seen my Red Sox binders, the videos I did on my Red Sox binder, this will be something that I compare to my Red Sox binder as well, and see if there's any cards in there that I don't have or need. My priorities are, as always, my sets first, and then the Red Sox binder second. But as you can see, as the cards tend to go on, there's less corner dings for the most part, and they're pretty solid. So there's good border on all of this card, and so, you know, it was just maybe my gut reaction. And like I said, Greg Morris Cards is very much a very trusted seller throughout the hobby. I've always had good experience when buying through Greg Morris Cards. I don't buy as much from them as some other collectors do, and I know they get top dollar for a lot of the cards that are sold. I don't buy as much from them because I don't typically buy singles on eBay unless I'm at the point where the set's down to the nitty gritty, you know. But I do. So, and a lot of their listings, not always, but a lot of their listings are vintage singles, which is, you know, I feel like this is almost a commercial for Greg Morris, good and bad, right? So Jimmy Pearsall. So there's some, I guess what you might say low-level stars and those types of players, but for the most part. But I'm just wondering if you guys see that as the cards go along, the condition sort of gets better. Now, this isn't a video to highlight any stars or anything like that, and whatnot. Now, there's some that are the dark background or gray, and then the white. I'm curious as to your opinion on this, because do you typically, is there a scenario where you'd collect one or the other? Is it something that, and this is where I told you when I first started this channel, that the idea is to learn as much from you guys as I hope to explain to people on what I know. Did every one of these cards have both a white border, a white background, and a gray background? Could you put together two parallel 1960 Topps baseball sets. Is that even feasible? I would assume so, but my assumption is not fact. So I am very fact oriented or fact driven person. So if people know, feel free to throw it in the comments. Um, I'll also take this opportunity to thank you guys. This one seems to have a little bit of a pinhole there, or what was the start of a pinhole. Didn't quite go all the way through the card. Um, so these cards do get nicer in condition, as I noted. I'll take this opportunity to thank all the subscribers. We're up to, as of today, 113 subscribers, and that's great. I want to thank you all for supporting the channel. Those of you who reach out through the comments and likes and whatnot. To me, very big. I love communicating. I try to answer all comments, or at least acknowledge all comments if I can. Because that's important. I suppose at some point the channel might get to a point where it might be a little bit more of a struggle to hit every comment, but as long as I can, I'm going to try to acknowledge the comments, because like I said, I learn from them, and I also enjoy interacting with folks about this hobby. That's the whole point, at least for me. One of the big things was to share Earl Wilson, to share some of my knowledge with the hobby, and then of course learn from people. I learn as much from watching YouTube videos. Right? They look fine, I guess. Like I said, I've measured up a lot of the cards, sporadically to the ones I have, and they're pretty much right there. So I will mix these cards now in with the large chunk of 1960 Topps I already have. I do have the Carl Yastrzemski rookie. The big one I'm missing for sure that I know of is McCovey, I believe. But this will go a long way towards making my set better and, better conditioned. See what I mean? Like the cards later, obviously centering's an issue. But as I was telling a viewer of the channel the other day when I was speaking with him, I sort of grade cards more. To me, the most important thing when I'm looking at vintage cards, and I know I've heard a lot of people say when they're discussing vintage, they'll say, "Oh, centering," and that's true. If you want to grade cards, there's no question centering is enormous. But to me, as a raw collector, for the most part, I'm looking to get a card that has 4 sharp corners, nice edges, a good surface, and then lastly, for me, centering. And I'll explain why. The basic idea for me is that these cards came from the manufacturer poorly centered. And while finding a great centered card is awesome, like this one here has some nice centering on it, Gene Stevens. And obviously, if I could find a card with 4 sharp corners and a nice surface and good edges and sharp centering, well, la di da, if it would be great. But for me personally, and this is just a personal preference, I'm looking more for corners and surface and edges before I look for centering, because the way I look at it, centering was a tops problem. Centering was a tops problem, and then that's not something really I have any control over. I can always upgrade cards, but if I'm looking at a card that has good um good corners and whatnot, then I'm gonna pick that one over one that's got slightly better centering. And that's, again, that's just personal preference. That, obviously the grading companies, and I think that starts with a grading company. When they start grading a card, the first thing they're going to probably look at is, are all the corners really sharp? Are the edges sharp? And then if they are, then they look at the center and say, all right, is this a banger? Is this one that's going to get an 8 or a 9 or a 7? Or is it a card that's going to get, a 4 or 5? Right? I mean, and you got to look at it and think, well, if we get a card that is centered, but it has, rough corners, that's not going to get a high grade, right? So, but again, just my opinion. That's all it is. I'm overall pleased with these cards. And I'm going to be putting in my commentary for Greg Morris on these cards shortly. What I'll do next is now go in and compare each card individually to my 1960 run that I have, and decide. And there were some high number cards too, 400s and this one even into the 500s. I mean, they're not like super high numbers. They weren't in the 580s or the 570s or anything like that. But there was a lot of 400s and some 500s. The other good thing was everything was individual. There was no duplication in the slot. And for me personally, when I'm buying a lot, that's what I want, right? I want the most unique and individual lot I can get with as little duplication as possible, so that I can fill in as many holes as possible. So that just gives you an idea of what we bought. I want to thank you guys for watching. I know this is not a super crazy video in the sense that we're dealing with a lot of stars, but maybe shortly I can do a video on the 1960 set and where it stands for me. Because I am doing pretty well in terms of numbers on that 1960 set. I'm sure it's missing a lot of studs, but that's something, I'm always working on. And these lots like this help me work on them. And then, of course, any duplication that'll come out of these lots will end up on my eBay store. You can certainly check out the link in the description for that if you're looking for 1960 and 1960 tops. I will put these on any duplication I end up with online. I want to thank you guys again so much for watching. If you enjoy the content on this channel, feel free to comment, like, share, subscribe. The subscription is 100% free. It just helps us. It helps support the channel, helps us get more views. I want to thank you guys. I really appreciate getting over 100 subscribers. And our little experiment sort of continues. And I hope you really are enjoying it, because I enjoy doing it. Thanks so much for watching. And as always, happy hunting. Thanks, guys.